Hi, folks. I'm Geoff Johnson. Welcome to Shift. This is a series of long-form interviews exploring life's many changes. Inspired in part by the dramatic global COVID-19 pandemic, I want to look at how people respond and adapt to dramatic upheavals elsewhere, too, in themselves, their personal life, and the world at large. My guest for this segment is New York-based actor Jeremy Crittenden. Before he'd accomplished 20 years working in musical theater and TV appearances on shows like Star Trek Discovery and The L Word, we grew up together in the same smallish town in Alberta. Over the next hour or so, we'll discuss his journey through his career, battling homophobia in his hometown, learning to forgive, and trying to keep moving forward when the world stops. This is Shift.
I think one of the things about going into the entertainment industry when you come from a place like Medicine Hat is that a lucrative and fulfilling career in the arts and entertainment always seemed like something outside of the adult grown-up world when you're living in a small town. We don't, or at least as far as I could remember, there might have been celebrities like hockey players who went on. You could see a path from Medicine Hat to being in the NHL a hell of a lot better than you could see a path from, going to Medicine Hat High School and Karen Cunningham's drama class to, a career on television or a career in film or a career in most of the creative arts, really. I think when you're growing up in a small town, envisioning that for yourself is a lot harder than if you're in a big center like, Toronto, Los Angeles, New York, Vancouver even, where you can see people and there are people in your actual life that are that have forged that path and can say, if that's what you want to do, these are the steps that you need to take. I don't think you get that in small towns. And I don't think that people in big centers want folks in small towns to know that.
If you don't see it happening, you don't know how, and you don't kind of believe in it. Was there a moment in your transition from Medicine Hat plays at the high school to where you are now, where there was actually a conversation or an observation that was the moment where you're like, this is actually a tangible, real world possibility for me?
I think for me, I was still going to high school when I was going and doing, plays in Edmonton over the summer as a part of a program with a professional theater up there. And we were working with professional actors, directors, people who were in the union. And it was sort of a mentorship program. And that was the first time that I had the opportunity to really get to know somebody working and living in the arts and who had made a career in the province, at least I was living in. But my bubble was very small. Calgary and Edmonton were really big cities to me. It wasn't until I moved out to Vancouver. The day I moved to Vancouver, I had never been on an airplane before. I had never seen the ocean before. And, maybe been to the mountains once or twice. I remember flying in over Vancouver and going like, oh my God, this is it. I've made it. There can't possibly be a more exciting place in the world. I'm trying to pinpoint beyond that moment of going like, oh, maybe that's a thing that I could do when it felt like this is a tangible way of making a living. Honest to God, I think I'm still looking for that moment, maybe.
You're not convinced yet?
No, it's... I think a lot of it is, I don't ever say luck, but I think it's, looking for the right opportunities and being in sort of like a state of readiness and continuing to grow all of the time. And if you're smart, you've figured out a way to make money along the way. Because the percentage of people that are working in arts and entertainment who are paying their bills exclusively working in arts and entertainment it's not a high number. It's not a really high number. I think most professionals are having to augment their income on the side, or, they've got a spouse. Yeah, exactly. Or family. It's a hell of a lot easier to make a living in this industry if you come from money. If your family's wealthy and you can, and you don't really have to worry too much about how you're going to pay your cell phone bill, or worry too much about do I buy groceries with this money, or do I pay my agent with this money? Yeah, I also think that there does come a certain point. I think maybe the more important point is that point when you realize how much money you are or are not going to make, and you decide to continue moving forward.
Yeah.
That I think is an interesting point in a person's career.
I learned recently that stand-up comedians, a lot of what they do for work is emceeing events, even weddings, strangers' weddings. People will hire them. Just here's $1,000 to come and be the MC at my wedding.
Get out.
Yeah, isn't that great? In your experience, awesome. Is there a kind of unexpected peripheral form of employment or related to your career as an actor that helps to glue that stuff together that maybe from before you were doing it, you didn't really realize was an opportunity that existed for people with that skill set?
Yeah, I think, I've surprisingly made a ton of money in my life using my voice. I worked in radio for 7 years as an entertainment reporter and a news anchor. Those were never, ever things that I ever anticipated I would do. I loved doing them. They were, learn a lot. It's a lot of fun. Maybe fun's the wrong word for working in news, but fulfilling, right? Yeah. But it was fulfilling. It was really fulfilling work. And, now at this point, I know a lot of actors who are doing voices.com or freelancing, or, I discovered there's quite a market for folks who are doing audiobooks. There's a ton of books that have never been made into audiobooks. It's a great revenue stream for people who are self-published. And those opportunities exist out there for folks that, know how to use their voice well, know how to use that medium well, which is a big part of it. That it's one thing to do something, or it's one thing to know how to speak into a microphone. It's another thing to really understand audio and understand storytelling using one medium like that. That's a whole art unto itself. That's really fascinating. So yeah, I think that's not even talking about voiceover and animation and those kinds of things. I haven't really done anything in that world, but looking at the ways that you can use your expertise and your skill set and how you can diversify that. I mean, that might be the only way to really become economy proof if you're, working in the arts, I think. And it's funny because a long time ago, that used to be the thing. It was become good at one thing, become really good at one thing. And that does work for a lot of people. You know what I mean? If you are an incredible dancer, that you can make a career doing just that. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I've never been really great at one thing, or I've never found the one thing that I'm really great at. But I do like variety, and I do like being creative. And so now, at least with the internet. And how easy it is to do something like this. 10 years ago, you couldn't do this. We couldn't be sitting here doing you couldn't just be like, I'm going to do a talk show. I'm going to do long form interviews, and I'm going to put that together. I'm going to put that out there, and I could have an unlimited audience. Now you can just do that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So you mentioned Vancouver and your moment landing in Vancouver as being your the Hollywood movie when the starlet comes out of her little town in Georgia and rolls into Hollywood and thinks the whole world it's going to happen now. Did it happen? Did it happen at all? Did it happen like that? Was there a devastating moment as you rolled into town and you realized, oh, I'm swimming with some bigger fish now?
Listen, this is the honest to God true story of the minute I came into Vancouver, and it is amazing. It is a perfect metaphor for my time in Vancouver. Got off the plane. I was being picked up by somebody who, worked at the school that I was going to be going to. I'd never met this person in my life. And it ended up being a totally different person. Somebody was like, oh, are you Jeremy? Oh, so-and-so sent me to come and pick you up. And I was like, stranger danger, alarms are flashing inside my head. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm going to get in this person's car. And we went straight to the school, which was in Gastown. And, the parking lot right beside the school, backed out onto, a crack alley, 100%. There are people, all kinds of people doing drugs and getting into big trouble in that alleyway as we're driving in. And I was like, what have I done? What is happening here? And that seemed like my time in Vancouver always was like, lots of optimism and lots of hope and seeing amazing things going on, but always feeling like we're 5 feet outside of a crack alley at the same time. It was hard. It was, school was tough, and I don't think I went to the right. I don't think I went to the places or the right places for education, because I think one of the big things about getting an education in the arts is about networking and getting to know people who are creating in that industry already, as well as learning alongside the people that are going to be doing that. So you kind of come out of school with a network. I didn't come out of school with a network because the school that I went to was sort of, about to die. It died while I was there. The folks that were teaching there at the time were not working in the industry. They were just teaching. So they weren't out there hiring. They weren't out there, giving people opportunities. Now, at the same time, I managed to break into the theater community in Vancouver, not being from there, which is very, very difficult to do. It is a very closed community, I would say. And I did great shows. I played great parts. I worked across the country from there. So obviously something right happened, but Vancouver was a tough town. I think I found more sort of happiness and saw more opportunity once I moved out to Toronto, and also once theater started slowing down for me. I started doing really well in television, and hilariously, it was film and television that I studied for. That's what I always wanted to do. Like when we were in high school together, that's what my plan always was to work in film and TV, but I worked in musical theater for 20 years. Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
Did you know in the moment that maybe this wasn't the right school for you? Did you understand at the time that the networking advantages that you could have got elsewhere weren't there? What was the... No,
I thought way too much of myself. I thought I was God's gift to everything anyway. So it didn't really matter. And also in a way, I mean, it's funny, like I look at that as a disadvantage of having gone to a place that was, sort of on its way out, working with people who were not out there creating and hiring actors and would not be able to give me opportunities or to show me towards opportunities in the same way, if you're at a very connected school. But at the same time, I also feel like in the arts and entertainment, we're all kind of loners in a way. All we really have is ourselves and our awareness of our skills, and whether we're constantly learning or whatever, it is ultimately something you are doing out there by yourself. And I've always felt like a loner in this industry. I've always felt like whatever I've been doing by myself. So there's also a lot of, I think there's also a lot of other stuff that a lot of people in the business are plagued by, a lot of self-doubt and a lot of insecurities and a lot of I'm supposed to be like this, or I'm supposed to be like that, or those sorts of things that I've never really been plagued by. Those things don't bother me. I like going to auditions, for example, because I don't see auditions, or I don't see not getting a job as rejection. Sure, there are some that hurt that you really, really want, but for the most part, I have a really, or at least in the people I talk to all the time, I feel that I have a healthier outlook at what that process is like. I can read a bad review and not be bothered by it. It doesn't ruin my day, I can look at my work with a certain level of, like I like to look at my work like a scientist, and I went in wanting to do this. Do I see that coming across out of the screen? And there's a lot of folks that can't do that. That part of the process troubles them, or auditions are stressful and not fun. And I just love doing what I do. So an audition is, to me, an opportunity to do the thing that I love doing and have worked so hard
doesn't always come
to
off
be able
every
to
time.
do. Yeah. So what if it doesn't? Not every performance comes off. Not every audition is going to come off, and you can't let any of it bother you. If money happens, great, but it's just an opportunity to do what you do, right?
Yeah. Well, you touched on, I think, something that's a plague of creatives and entertainers, and I think it's a plague for everybody, is this imposter syndrome sort of thing. Lots of people do feel like I'm getting away with it. I also think of that as something that changes people's definition of what success is. So when you say failing an audition is part of the process, it's part of the career, it's part of doing what you love, people think that the only way you're going to be satisfied is if you win an Oscar because you're a film actor. The only way I'm going to be satisfied is if I win a Grammy or sell a platinum album or whatever.
Right.
Is there a different definition of career success that you use for yourself that you feel you've achieved or that you're still looking for?
Well, I think that's like such an individual thing, right? You know, if you talk to me when I was 18 years old, yeah, you know, I wanted to be the biggest star in the world and have a wall full of Oscars. If you, you know, when people ask me about it today, I keep saying I really want to build something. My goal is for my career right now is that I want to build something. I want to, you know, whether it's writing something and directing something that I have been a part of from the moment of, you know, from scratch up until seeing it screened somewhere and people throwing Rotten Tomatoes at the screen. But that's what I want to do. You know what I mean? It's not, for me at this point, it's not a monetary thing. I want to be able to do what I love to do and pay my bills 100%. But, you know, I've always had like side hustles. I've always had other jobs, or I've always had other ways that money had been coming in. So I don't think my career goals necessarily are really monetarily specific. Maybe that's bad. Maybe that's why I'm broke right now. But no, and I think it's different for everybody. I know a guy who in Vancouver actually, whose definition of being a professional was that the only way you made any money whatsoever was he was an actor. So through acting. Mm-hmm. That was the only people who were professional were only acting to make money. There was no side hustle. There was no, you know, serving tables on in between jobs. Mm-hmm. There was none of that. You could only make your money as an actor. And I have to tell you that when I first heard that, I was shook. I was like, oh my God, I've always made money in other ways. I like to be able to go on a vacation every now and then. I don't like living in poverty. I like a little bit of, you know, some kind of financial security. And it made me go like, oh, does that mean I'm not a professional actor? I'm in the union. I've been doing this my entire adult life. Am I not professional according to this person? And I remember being like super offended by it. And if I look back at, you know, the life that person has led, his life has been way harder than it ever needed to be, because that also bound him into, he defined himself by that goal of only ever needing to make money, or only ever making money as an actor. And I think it was just such a huge mistake for him, but that was the course that he wanted to take, right? That was his goal, only making money as an actor. But I don't know if it's still his goal or not. I don't think he's working in the industry anymore, to be totally honest. But yeah, for me, it's just, I think I've had different goals along the way. My goal right now is to overcome my procrastination and overcome my fear of succeeding, fear of failing, and create something from scratch that I've built with my own two hands and whatever falls out of my odd little brain.
All right. Well, to that then, when was the last time you had a show on a stage or in a space with, even if it was filming with hundreds of people in a room, and been, you know, obviously before the pandemic?
Yeah, the last thing that I worked on was actually for was a couple of commercials that I did build. I wrote them, I directed them, I ended up having to be in them, and that was great. That was really cool, because I had never, you know, I had directed theater before, but I hadn't directed camera work before. And
I guess framing in the camera is a different thing than setting a stage and stuff.
Well, sure, yeah, and it's and I had a great crew. I had a director of photography who was phenomenal. And I had a line producer, and we had a great sound guy on the set as well. So, the areas of expertise that I don't have, I had people in those positions, which was the right way to spend the little tiny amount of money that we had, and I could focus on what was happening on the set itself. And it was a really great experience, and it was great. The crew. Basically, I went to this production company and said, "Here's what I needed to do. I need to do these 2 ads. This is how much money we have." I'm doing a lot of this stuff myself because you can tell from the budget, we don't have money for editors and all that stuff. And I can do that stuff on my own. And so, midway through the day, the producer came up and he's like, "I have to tell you, we were really nervous about this because we get that phone call a lot. I have this idea. I have this thing I want to do. I only have a couple $1,000s, and, I want to work with you guys." And he said, usually it's a disaster. It's a really tough day. And the crew had been talking about how well this day had been going because we were prepared and ready to go. And, which made me feel so great because I kind of thought it was one of those moments where you go like, I've built up knowledge over the course of my career, and find myself in this odd moment of like, okay, now you have to put it all to work, trial by fire. And it went well. It went well. These ads that we did were cute and funny. The only problem was my performance in them, to be totally honest.
Oh no.
Yeah, exactly. I remember watching them being like, "Oh, I wish I could recast that idiot.
Yeah,
we change him."
If there was a good director that could have sorted that guy out and
exactly. Cast this garbage.
That's too bad.
It was great to do something like that, and to it was really messing around with the ideas of like, this is something I think that I always wanted to do, and now's my opportunity to do it. And is this fun? Do I enjoy doing this? And I did. I really enjoyed doing that, and that was great. And then to see it would, these ads were being used in a large conference in a giant room with hundreds of people. I wasn't at the conference, but they recorded when it premiered in this theater space, and they laughed at the jokes, which was funny, and people came up going like, "Wow, I think this was the best ads we've seen here." It was great. It was great to build something and see it up there, and people seemed to enjoy it. And that really that was a lovely moment. I miss those moments.
When you have something that you've created from the conception to realization, and a dozen people like it, that's in a way more fulfilling than I was a small wheel in a big thing. It's a totally different kind of realization of your own capacity, even to touch one person's life with something that you've been a complete part of.
Because you're testing that idea, you're testing that thing that you've been thinking about for so long, and you've played over in your head 100 times, and you get that moment to like put it together and like put it out there, and somebody walks by and goes, "Hey, that's really cool," or "Hey, that that's funny," or whatever. And it just like all of a sudden those boxes in your head, you're able to check them off. And that's huge. That's so huge. I think especially if you're someone who's creative and you are trying out new things, you're pushing your own boundaries. Those are really gratifying, defining moments, I think, for people.
What have you been doing with the last 8 or 9 months, if you've had this time, possibly to start building something new from the ground up? Has it just been too overwhelming of an experience for you to actually be putting something together right now? It took me a while to kind of overcome the first couple of months of thinking about my own financial destruction or whatever else might come from what was going on in the world.
Being here, I married an American a little while ago, and he's an actor, and he's was doing a huge tour. So when the job opportunity came along, we were like, okay, great, let's get married. New York is where we're going to make our home. Prior to that, we've been really kind of like, things have been going well for me in Toronto. Do we want to live in Toronto? Do we want to live? Where do we want to be? Canada, US, blah 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 blah. And we sort of made that decision to stay in New York. And of course, the pandemic hit, and the tour gets paused for the time being. We're still, the plan is still that the tour will be back out on the road, which is, really, really exciting. And we can't wait for that. It just seems so far off right now as we're broke. We're absolutely broke, and I'm involved with the company that did the ads for EasyTix, which is an investment that me and my ex-husband had made. And, that's provided me, the financial cushion to be able to be here and not be working on a stage or in front of a camera. And, I don't really know that business is going to survive or not. Who knows? Maybe by the time this airs, I'll have an answer to that question. But in the meantime, it's devastating to see something that was a really amazing thing that was supposed to be the financial security or at least the cushion to be able to go and do what I love doing the rest of my life. Watching that disappear, and all of a sudden there's huge questions about it. It's been the first time in a long time that I've gone like, how am I going to pay my rent? So there's been a lot over those 7 months, and those days have been very overwhelming. Those days have been, lots of sleepless nights. But those moments also make you go like, okay, well, you have to be ready now for whatever's going to be next. What's going to be next? What do you want it to be? Do you want to be acting still? Do you want, so I was going to be going to film school actually right before this all started. I had enrolled in film school, and just before everything went crazy, I pulled out of the film school thinking maybe this isn't the right time for this. So yeah, those moments of panic have always made way to moments of like, okay, learn, do a master class on writing, read a book, start messing around with photography. If you can't be doing film school, you can still be learning all of these things. I mean, anybody who's gone to film school practically will say like, there's, nothing you can't learn on YouTube, so I've been like soaking up a lot of knowledge. And so I don't, long way to answer your question. No, I don't really quite know what tomorrow will be or what I'll be doing once the pandemic is done. But I do force myself to keep I do feel I've at least been moving forward, if not financially, if not in my actual career, at least in terms of exploring ideas and developing new skills that will help me for what I hope would be next anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Have you seen anyone around you, either personally or professionally, that have taken it pretty hard and are maybe struggling, or have totally succeeded in a transition, or at least existing in this kind of limbo state in your industry or in your life?
Well, I think there's, there's definitely some people up in Canada where film production opened up sooner, who have been busy and like, great, this has been a really, really good opportunity, a really good time for Canadian actors, particularly on American productions who wanted to shoot in Canada. There'd been more work for Canadian actors because there's fewer people to move across the border, fewer people having to go into quarantine. It made more sense. Really, really great moment for a lot of folks in Toronto and Vancouver. There's also, a lot of people who have left the industry. I just read a status update on Facebook from a friend of mine who has decided to leave the industry. It seems like permanently, and is having a really hard time with that choice, which makes a lot of sense. You typically don't just fall into becoming an actor, or in this person's case, as a dancer. He's done that his entire life. That he's worked on his entire life to, at this point, go like, I don't think there's a future here now in the thing that I've worked my entire life for. So that's been a hard transition. And so it's kind of like the whole range, right? But I think for most people, the vast majority of people I know or have spoken to are trying to be as optimistic as humanly possible, trying to keep a foot in that door, a lot of people have started a side hustle or, jewelry business or, fashion consulting or all kinds of different things that like feed their creativity in some way that they can make some money doing. And maybe in hopes of getting back to work when work comes around again, particularly for folks working in theater, like theater's not coming back anytime soon,
That's
maybe if you're doing film and TV, but like live, all of us sitting together in a giant room, breathing the same air, singing and spitting in each other's faces.
Yeah.
I don't know when that comes back.
The stadium concerts are years away at this point.
I was talking to a guy that lives in our building. He's a dancer. Just booked his first Broadway job. They had just opened, and he's a swing, so he's not on every night. And he didn't even get the opportunity to do the show once before COVID hit. It's like, and I know exactly in his mind, he's like, I made my Broadway debut, but I didn't get to make my Broadway debut. Like, I bet he feels so fucking robbed. I know that's how I would feel, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, I was talking to him and I was like, what are you up to right now? And he's like, there's a group of us that are like, putting this kind of like Broadway, production numbers. We're like, doing these songs and these, dances and stuff. And we're just kind of doing it just because, and like you could seem like already starting to apologize.
Devalue it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I just wanted to be like, why are you, I think it was like, dude, that's awesome. Like you should be so excited about it. I was like, what are you guys doing with it? Like, are you putting it online or what's your plan for it? And they're doing it for like kids' hospitals.
Fuck, that's great.
It's going to be a thing that they like live stream and they offer it to children's hospitals all across the United States. Yeah. And I was like, why are you like apologizing in your body language and your vocabulary about this amazing thing that you're doing that is so awesome for you guys to come up with this? For me, I'm like, the little bit of Southern Alberta in me is like, cool. So all of y'all are going to do that, and they're going to sell tickets
who's gonna
for $20 a pop. Yeah. And I can help you do that. And everyone makes money, right? They're like, no, we're doing it for sick kids. What's your problem? Yeah.
My first thought that was kind of parallel to that was, young kids, 20 years old, worked for a year, got 20 grand together between the five of them, bought a van, recorded an album, paid a proper producer, and we're about to go on an album release tour. And they were this summer was, oh man, we booked all those festivals and then ended up with a van that nobody wants. I've actually been looking at what will be a mass retirement of musicians as a huge opportunity for 20-year-old musicians now. This thing, it is going to create all this space where new things are going to move into.
I think you're right. I think particularly, for folks who've been marginalized in these industries as well, this is an incredible moment because that the industry is trying to make space for people it has not been making space for before. People who aren't white, namely, people who are straight white guys, the industry is, or at least it says, trying to make space for more voices in that way. So that's great. And you're right. There's a lot of people who, step away going like, this is that push they needed to go and become a real estate agent or whatever, to find, whether, even if they're not looking for happiness, they're looking for some security or whatever, for whatever reason it is. Lots of folks have also left some space behind in the industry. So I think a few things are possible anyway. It could get worse because the people that are left behind are the people that are in it to make money. Maybe it becomes far more commercial. Maybe it becomes far more controlled, and maybe there are just fewer people, but still being, but money being the big thing that maintains control. That's a possibility. Maybe all of a sudden we get these great voices that we haven't heard before that have been kept from us or that we weren't listening out for. Maybe we get a new generation, particularly of young people who are innovative and want to do things in a different way, or want to own their own work and want to own their own distribution and are not only incredible creators, they're incredible entrepreneurs. It's going to be really interesting to see what this year, what all that space that this year forced, it's going to be really cool to see what ends up moving into that space. Because those are all options. Those are all options now, you know?
To fix an engine or a machine, you have to stop it. And then you can replace that cog, you can make it more efficient, you can change the oil, but you can't really do that while it's running. This is the closest to any time in my life or really recent history that we've kind of stopped the engine of the global economy and whatever. Do you think that there's things about life beforehand, maybe on a bigger scale than our individual lives, that you would like to see us take this chance to kind of reset and adjust now?
Well, I don't think anything ever stops. I just think that there's now a lot of pent up energy. And I think if you look at what's happening politically in the world, I think it reflects that. There's a lot of pent up energy, and a lot of people are venting, you know, and it does feel explosive. But you know, the thing about it is that we all have changed our habits. All of our habits have changed. We changed the way we shop. We've changed the way we interact with our friends. We've changed the way we get entertainment. Everything has changed. All of our habits have changed. So I think there's a huge force that like wants everything to go back to normal and just wants to push hard to get everything back to normal. It's why in the States, there was just this push for everything to be, you know, reopened again. Damn the science. We need to get back to normal. You know, we're seeing the consequences of that, like by the minute in the States. And, you know, then there's also a lot of people who have like been willing to sort of roll with the punches and accept some changes and stuff. And so, yeah, I do think, you know, society is going to work a little bit differently in terms of like what I would like to see working different. World peace. No, I really wish we would just treat each other with more respect. I really wish we would listen better, and not necessarily for the, you know, kind of nonsense rhetoric that is really easy to spew and amplify, but actually listen to each other's fears and to each other's, you know, what's really kind of going on underneath all of the yelling and screaming and shouting. And I always, I'm in terms of politics, people go like, you know, my friends in the States go, "Oh, you're so liberal. You're so liberal." I just go like, I'm really not. I'm really not that, you know, that far on the left side of the political spectrum. I think I'm, you know, I think I'm a little left of center, because I don't like this idea of like, you know, being on the left means you have to support and acknowledge and go for these specific criteria. Like there are things from all over the place that I think make sense. Yeah, exactly.
There's different streams of left or right, and some of them reflect different things. It's also difficult for us as Canadians because the Democrats in the States are actually right of our conservatives still on most causes. So when they talk about a radical leftist, they're actually talking about somebody that's farther right than anybody we've ever elected, like in the last 80 years. So it's talking politics with Americans when you're Canadian is impossible.
Yeah. But, you know, I never shy away from a political discussion with anybody, and I never, you know, I never feel out of my depth because there's so much common ground. Like, you know, even if you can't get to should there be universal healthcare somewhere or not, almost everybody agrees that you shouldn't lose your home. You shouldn't go bankrupt because you're sick. You know, everybody agrees that if you're ill with cancer, you should be able to get treatment. You know, like there are these like sort of fundamental things that everybody does agree upon. It's just the road on how we get there where we really start to differ. So if we start talking to folks, you know, notable exceptions being things like, you know, racism, hate, you know, there are some sort of things that we may never ever have and shouldn't ever want to have any
Normalize.
kind of common ground on. But if we can understand what, even within those things, if we can understand what the fears are, what our fears are in this world, we understand each other a little bit better. Even if we don't change each other's minds, we understand who the person is that you're politically opposed to, I suppose, or I don't know. There's just so much yelling and screaming and so little listening. If there was more listening, I think even as divided as we are, we could at least kind of get by a bit better.
How has 4 years of being a gay man in the United States under Trump, how's that transition been, or that experience?
Well, I mean, listen, I've also the amount of those 4 years that I've been in the States, I've been in New York. So it's not like it's not like I'm in Wyoming or, South Carolina or something like that. But you still feel that. You still feel that, right? Because it's on the news every day, and it's in the things that, you get to know people that are from South Carolina, or you get to know people that are from Texas. And for them, it's different. So they know it a little bit differently than I would. But it's weird because even just in the last few weeks, there have been the Supreme Court
nomination,
Amy Coney Barrett. Yeah. And just as she's getting, confirmed for the Supreme Court, two of the justices write out saying, hey, we should, now would be a great time to take a look at that whole Obergefell case. Well, that's the case that legalized gay marriage across the United States and defined that as a right. So you've got the Supreme Court, showing a little ankle there and saying like, hey, this is something that we'd be willing to toss aside. That's crazy, because I think it's the first time. Like, listen, I'm used to as a gay guy, I've known a lot of my adult life of going like, oh, I have fewer rights than other people, and there are lots of minorities that know what it feels like to have fewer rights than other people. Women know what that feels like as well. But it's an odd it's an odd feeling having the government flirt with the idea of clawing back your rights. That's crazy. And that's not something I'd ever felt before. I know women feel that way anytime any kind of anti-abortion law is passed, or, new regulations put in place to try to undermine those things. Women feel that all the time in the US. And that's been a different feeling. But at the same time, I think it's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back sort of thing.
Bit of a waltz.
How they feel on the right as well. So yeah, it's been wild. I'm ready for politics to be boring.
Yeah.
I really love that. Love that.
That would be all right. My other show, I intentionally avoid all the politics and the COVID talk because there's so much of it everywhere else. But I thought that it's important. We're encapsulating a time that I never thought I would see. As growing up as a kid in small town southern Alberta, you don't think about pandemics and you don't think about politics. And honestly, an interesting thing that I kind of realized myself, because we lived in this small southern Alberta town that had no diversity at all, I actually, in a way, credit that experience to my own lack of, or at least I can't ever say I have a complete lack of prejudice, because I think everybody does to a degree, but much reduced level of prejudice, because we didn't walk down the street with someone and see a black guy and have somebody say, oh, that guy's going to steal your car, because there wasn't even like the stimulus for that conversation to happen.
Yeah.
The way a child doesn't know that another person is another race or another religion or another sexuality or whatever until they're told that. And I feel like, weirdly, even though I lived in a fairly conservative prairie town, from my position as a straight white guy with a dad and mom that were there, and never encountering really any adversity whatsoever, that was part of what kind of kept me open-minded, I guess, was that I didn't have any experiences to. I assume, and this might be a little heavy, but your experience in the same town must have been a little different.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, I think I've been back to Medicine Hat twice since I moved away. I have a steel plate in my jaw for the rest of my life to remind me of how unfair small town Alberta was. it's the absolute reason I never go back. It is the absolute reason that I never go back. I never felt safe in that community as a teenager, at least not after, once I came out of the closet when I was 16 years old in, what was that, 1998 in Medicine Hat, Alberta. I didn't even know another gay person in Medicine Hat at the time. I know it's different now, which is great. But I never felt safe there after that moment. I had a rule of no, I'm not going to go to, grad parties. I'm not going to go to farm parties and do all those things that, define those last years of going to school. And for most people that, grew up in Medicine Hat, those are the things you do in, grade 11, grade 12. You have these, big raucous parties. I broke that rule once and I got my jaw broke that night. So that's not of course I've, plenty of happy memories. I've got great, I don't know that I really have any friends that live in Medicine Hat anymore. But I certainly have a wonderful family that live there, and I don't really see them all that often because of this. I don't want to go back. I'm sure it's a very different place than it was before, but that will always be for me the defining moment of my time in that city.
You still carry physical and emotional damage from that, but yeah, at the same time, you seem now, just in our conversation, to be remarkably stoic about the possibility of interacting with other people who might have attitudes that maybe aren't going to end up hospitalizing you, but are still oppressive to
you hope anyway
to your existence. Was there an experience, or was there just is there a way of summarizing how you managed to come from being really brutally attacked to being remarkably open-minded, to talking to people with at least some significant differences to the worldview?
I would say two things. First of all, what doesn't kill you does really truly make you stronger. They weren't able to kill me, so I only got stronger. And also, just the concept, as hokey as it sounds, is forgiveness. I went to there was only one of these, guys, a large group that were involved in my attack that ever saw the inside of a courtroom or the inside of a jail cell. And I was there when he was in court, and I made my victim impact statement. And as a part of that, I said, I forgive you. I forgive you for what happened. Not to make him feel any better, but to make me feel better, so that I don't have to carry that burden of hating somebody or resenting someone for the rest of my life. I certainly, I don't go to straight bars. Like I wouldn't go to a nightclub that wasn't a gay bar. I just wouldn't feel comfortable in that setting. I never have since then, and I wouldn't again to this day. And it's been 20 years, but it's in terms of defining moment of when that happened. I think maybe acknowledging that I would only become stronger as a result, not deciding for it to not be a negative thing the rest of my life, and forgiving that person. That at least put me on the pathway for that sort of, to drop in bit by bit, step by step, day by day. There were still lots of times where I would be walking down the street in Vancouver at night, and there'd be a couple of guys walking behind me that I would be absolutely petrified about what was going to happen, absolutely paranoid. That doesn't happen anymore, which is great. I don't know when the tide finally shifted, but I at least knew in doing those two things, I would put myself on the right path. Maybe I would have accelerated had I had therapy. That wasn't something that I got, and I really wish that I would have. And I would recommend to anybody else who, God forbid, would find themselves in that situation to get help for that recovery process. Because I also think that maybe I'm lucky that I feel this way after sort of my own self-guided recovery from that kind of trauma. But I at least I think I gave myself two gifts early on in having those sort of two elements in my mindset.
Right on. That's pretty healthy. I don't know.
Thankfully.
Like I said, I was a straight white guy with a good home life and everything. Growing up in a town where straight white guys with good home lives do just fine. The only other
It's true. We
kind of
didn't learn
minorities.
these things growing up in Medicine Hat. We didn't learn like the I always knew there was a lot of racism around in Medicine Hat in terms of particularly for Indigenous people. I've always felt that. But beyond that, my gosh, there was so much that I learned. Like once I left that small town and continue to this day to learn, especially being in a insanely diverse city like New York City, which I just absolutely love. But yeah, every single day you learn like a little bit more about how life is different for people based on things that are beyond their control.
I think about yourself as one of very, very few LGBTQ types that I knew in Medicine Hat growing up. And then even ethnic minorities, Bindu Suri, now Bindu Chaudhry. I pronounced it wrong. She's a CTV news presenter now. So it's kind of interesting.
Yes, that's right.
I wouldn't want to give the impression that a little conservative, maybe not quite accepting as it should be, community might force people into excelling or to actually going out and finding their place. But there is something about having discomfort, and discomfort might be a grossly too small a word for what some people's experiences were. But would you say that feeling uncomfortable or literally fearing for yourself there gave you a sense that it was really imperative for you to find a place where you were comfortable and where you could create and where you could kind of blossom?
In a way, I actually have always felt that for me anyway, getting something out of hard times or dark times or whatever is moving into the discomfort, is not looking for that safe spot again, but heading into the muck, finding out about how that's going to change you, make you a better person, or not. Sometimes I think this whole pandemic thing, I've honestly said to friends so many times, I was like, I think this whole thing has made me feel darker as a person. And I don't mean that like in a bad way, but I think I maybe have like a bit of a tougher skin from this. I think it made me see like another side of humanity as a result of it. Being in New York when the pandemic hit and 1,000 people in this city were dying every single day. We live really close to a hospital. So it was sirens. You're saying sirens 24/7 is not hyperbole. They just didn't stop. And because we live so close to a hospital, we live around healthcare workers. Most people, you go out on the street to go grab lunch, people are in scrubs. They're hospital workers, right? So you're really thinking about your neighbors and, 7 p.m. when everybody opens the windows and we're banging the pots and pans, you learn something about humanity. You learn something about community in that moment that I had never seen before outside of the Winter Olympics in Vancouver. When the hockey team won, the whole city erupted, right? I hadn't experienced something like that again until the pandemic hit. And then it was every night at 7 p.m. That was really amazing. You learn something about community then. And then you see folks who like don't put a mask on and don't want to put a mask on. And I'm going to go and get my coffee at Starbucks and I'm going to cough on somebody to prove a point about my freedom. You learn something about humanity there, right? And so maybe maybe darker is not, or maybe I see more clearly now, or I don't know what it is, but I do think that the trauma of all of this that's happening has changed me in a way, and will affect what I do later on. But I think charging into that discomfort is where you really find out about yourself and the people around you. And that's when I always find the best stuff happens. Not when I'm feeling hurt, but when I'm like driving into that discomfort.
Exploring what it actually is and what it means.
Yeah.
So let's pretend for a minute that there's a vaccine tomorrow, and 6 months
I
from
like
now,
playing pretend.
yeah, we're all immune to the COVID thing. That's all done. Let's pretend that Trump hasn't started a civil war and the world's kind of more or less stumbling along as it was before. How would you like to see your own life, and what lessons from this period would you want to carry into your personal and professional things? And what would you actually like to be doing? What would you like to have your hands in?
I would like to be making stuff, no matter how big or small it was. I would like to. I heard something recently about creativity and the idea of like, being a consumer versus being a creator. And I can't exactly remember what the whole talk was about, but it was on this sort of idea of like, if you're procrastinating, for example, and I'm a huge procrastinator, you're busy consuming. Your ratio of consumption to creation is way, way, way heavy on the consumption. Mm-hmm. And I still feel that that's where I'm at, but I've at least identified it. So I would love in that world to be going like, okay, no, I'm going to consume less. I'm going to create more, and actually have a way of like monitoring that myself, because I also feel like a big part of or at least a big part of my creative process, is understanding some of the data behind it, is understanding what some of the math is. And so I think when that time hits, I want to know how much I consume. I want to know how much I'm creating, and I want to always have the gas on the creation side of things, not just in terms of, because I think when you're even creating stuff that's not even for, to make money off of, to sell or whatever, you're, like I said, is that idea of being ready earlier. That's how you are ready. That's how you're always ready to go. So that when I do decide like, okay, I wrote the short film, guys, come on, actor friends, let's go acting. Let's make a little movie.
I don't need to spend 4 months learning how to do this and that. I've got.
Yeah, I've done it. I know how to use my voice better. I think that's what it really comes down to when you're doing that. You're ready to use your voice.
I was looking at your performer CV there, and there were most of the things I think I'd known about. I'd seen on Facebook. He's in Star Trek. Jean-Luc Picard is like my father figure, just about. I mean, I have a great dad, but like if I had had to have a fake father figure, it'd be
a sci-fi dad.
Yeah. So the fact that you did that Star Trek stuff is special to me.
Me too, man.
There was something very important missing from your performer's bio.
Which one?
I think this is because you were jealous that I was the star. Where is it? You can see that?
What is this?
So that's me.
Okay, that I recognize that guy, yeah.
I kind of blurred out some other people, but there's Bindu. And over here...
I'm about to see.
You know that kid? This was Pete's Luncheonette of Terror. I guess I was in grade 8 and you were in grade 7.
You need to send me that. Oh
all
my
kinds
God.
of faces in there that I've somewhat disguised. But yeah, I've got a few photos. I don't know how much of you is in it.
Look at that. Look at that kid. Look at that facial serve. Look at him. She is ready. She is performing. Look at that. Oh my gosh. What is that? I think that's a part down the middle. I can't quite tell.
Yeah. It's good. It's good that your face kind of squared up. If you'd have stayed with that ball, that wouldn't. I don't know if that would have worked for you. You could have probably played a child for like until you were 40, but
I just about did. Okay, so as you can tell, evidenced from that photo, amazing find. I have to tell you, but you really do need to send that to me.
Yeah.
I always, as a kid, looked like Alfred E. Newman because I had a big space between my teeth and just like this round face and big ears. I don't think any of that changed until like 2 years ago.
Do you almost get a spot on Mad TV, like playing Alfred E. Newman?
Oh, that photo is great. I will say there is something special about that group that we all kind of grew up with in this crazy little conservative town. We had this little gang of misfits, right? Who were all like positive and look to see the best in people. And even if we failed at it sometimes, we're always trying to be, welcoming and open arms to anybody around us. And, I think we should all credit that little group that we were in or, came in and out of with making us all pretty amazing adults, because anybody that I know who was in and out of that group is to this day a really cool, amazing, awesome adult. And there's a lot of folks that grew up in cities like that didn't have those people, didn't have folks like your folks, didn't have those influences around them. So we're lucky.
I'll say so. What is a day in the life of a Jeremy Crittenden during a pandemic like? You just go to the gym and drink veggie juice and stuff?
I'm trying to get back to the gym on the regular again. I'm having a really hard time with it, especially right now. Like I probably would have been going this week, but because like the COVID numbers are kind of getting out of hand again, I don't really want to get on the subway. I have to figure it out. Something, because I actually have been way more anxious since I have not been going regularly, since I've not been like getting some exercise regularly. I've been way more anxious, had a really bad panic attack this week. Which is this is also a new thing from the pandemic, as I, get these brutal anxiety attacks. But exercising really helps that, right? So I don't know. I have to figure out a new kind of way to manage this or be brave about it, because I got COVID like day one.
Oh, you did?
Pandemic hits, COVID, instantly.
Did you have like severe symptoms or noticeable symptoms?
Okay,
You're just the first person that I've talked to that actually has been diagnosed. It's like where I live on the island. It's a little town of 1,300 people, right? I'm out near Tofino in Ucluelet. And while we do have tourists coming and going like crazy, there hasn't been a local outbreak of any sort. So,
that's great.
And my parents are holed up in their house and all that. So you're literally the first person actually I'm speaking with that was diagnosed at all. So.
Oh, and I wasn't even diagnosed. So when I got, there were no tests. In January, I got sick, and I have never been sick like that in my life. Like in the middle of the night, my chest would hurt so much. I would just be like writhing in pain, and I'd have these like batshit crazy dreams, just like the most bizarre, weird dreams. And I remember like a couple other people I know had this same kind of thing, and we were talking about it, and we're like, what the hell is it? Maybe it's that thing that's happening in China, because I was like, Wuhan is really breaking out. I think they're about to lock it down. And, we like joke, maybe it's that, right? Mm-hmm. And then, a month and a half later, once the lockdown was happening, my husband came back from tour, and he'd just been back like a day and a half, and all of a sudden he had a cough, and we kind of looked at each other and thought, oh, I hope that's not. And his health just like nosedived. And I got that as well. But the difference was like in January, I didn't lose taste and smell. The reason I know it was COVID in March was because I lost taste and smell.
Oh, crazy.
But this was like, honest to God, it was like the day they were locking down New York. So when Zach got it, I was calling the hotline and going like, hey, these are the symptoms he has. This is what's going on. He's like, at nighttime, he falls asleep. He's kind of like, he's not making sense when he speaks. Like his was kind of gnarly. And they just basically, the woman on the hotline was like, there are not enough tests. You are not going to be tested. At this point, you need to operate under the assumption that you're both positive for it, and you need to be in quarantine. You cannot leave your house. It was that early on. Yeah. They were like, don't go to the hospital. Don't leave your house. Yeah. Find someone to get your groceries. We have no idea what the hell this is. China. Yeah. Yeah. When I got sick with this thing in January, and I always say, like, I had this thing and I don't know, like, I don't actually think it was COVID, but like some of the things line up. Mm-hmm. And again, a few friends had it, and we joked about it for a bit. And then I think it was just recently I read something that was like, they think it was circulating in New York as early as middle of December that it was already, stateside and passing around between people. So, I mean, it's absolutely possible, but the fact that I kind of got, the second, whatever happened in March, bit of COVID was way less. For me, it was really, really mild, lost taste and smell, which is a bizarre thing.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even realize I was making coffee one morning, and we had a roommate at the time, and she went, "Oh, that coffee smells really good today." And that's when I realized I was making espresso and I didn't smell it.
Crazy.
And then I tasted it and I was like, oh my gosh, it was so weird. And I think it was, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, maybe I had no taste and smell before it started coming back. Zach was gone for weeks.
Yeah.
For weeks. He didn't taste or smell anything.
Wow. That would be weird. It's like, just being temporarily blind or something almost, but you would notice instantly that you were blind.
Yes.
Like
that was the thing.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. Have you actually had an antibody test, or have you had it confirmed by a medical professional that it was COVID, or you were told to assume so and the symptoms added up? Does that give you have you had any sensations about I'm indestructible now? I've got my antibodies. I can go and lick doorknobs or whatever. So.
I've been licking doorknobs. No, I didn't know because, nobody really knows. Like people go oh, you'll probably have a certain amount of immunity for, maybe a month or 2 or 3 months or 4 months or whatever. I didn't want to find out if it was true.
Just keep living smart.
Yeah. And I still, exactly. We haven't really seen many people. We've, wash hands, socially distanced. I always have a mask on, all of that kind of stuff. I don't know. It just doesn't I don't want to know. I don't want to find out. Yeah. I don't want it a second time, because even the mild case that I had, I found mine came in these waves, and you could feel a wave coming on, and it was just get to the couch, sit down. You're not going to want to be alive for the next few minutes, and it was just these waves of feeling just trash. It felt awful. And then in January, I couldn't even, I don't even think I checked email for 2 weeks. It took me out, I couldn't stay awake for more than a few minutes at a time. It was brutal.
I'm going to use that as an excuse. Next time I'm just procrastinating on sending an email back. Sorry, COVID knocked me out for a week. I didn't even check my emails.
COVID, not really, yeah.
Thanks for watching, folks. Thanks to Jeremy for being part of our beginning of this Shift interview series. I just want to say to folks, if you're watching in Medicine Hat, that you should probably know that part of the reason we did this interview series was acknowledging that there's been a mental health crisis in that community and a rash of suicides, particularly among men around 40 years old, those being the people we grew up with. So while Jeremy has his issues with the town and I have my own, this entire interview, while it might have seemed a little harsh, was in a way an act of love to our home community. So please understand that. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them. Just know that any homophobia or other bullshit like that will get you deleted and reported right away. Thanks for watching Shift. We'll be back with more segments when I get around to it. Shift was created, edited, produced, and hosted by Geoff Johnson. Special thanks to the Liminality Corporation for promotional considerations.